Money corrupts people, a truth I've witnessed often, though I never anticipated my wife would succumb. Our life was peaceful, filled with abundance and lacking in want, until a wealthy man tempted me with cash to spend nights with her. Initially skeptical, I soon grasped the dangerous snare I had stumbled into. My wife and I are both employed at the same marketing firm. Lucy excels in her role as a client relationship ambassador, where she impressively manages client interactions. Meanwhile, I'm Mark, overseeing the IT teams. Our lives were sailing smoothly, both employed and content, making good progress with renovations on our fixer-upper home. We're blessed with two wonderful children, Emma, aged 13, and Daniel, aged 11. We live near our families and have a close circle of friends. In our mid-30s, we complement each other well, though Lucy undoubtedly steals the show with her striking appearance. Standing tall at 5 feet 9 inches with long blonde hair and captivating blue eyes, Lucy embodies a vibrant Scandinavian charm, reflecting her Swedish roots. She's always on the go, full of energy. I'm 3 inches taller, with sandy hair, and have a preference for endurance sports like cycling and running, maintaining a lean physique, fit and active without the flashy gym focus. I was taken aback by the invitation to spend a long weekend on a private island owned by one of our firm's clients. Our chief executive, Jack Edwards, informed me that he, along with his wife Margaret and a couple of the directors and their partners, were also attending. Lucy, being the client's primary point of contact, had been invited as well. It seemed like I was simply there to fill space. But as they say, never look a gift horse in the mouth. Jack elaborated that the client was extremely wealthy, our firm's largest customer, and that we would depart early Friday and return Monday on a private charter with all expenses covered. Lucy was already aware of the trip when I mentioned it on the way home. She had been working closely with the client for months, appeared quite impressed, and was eagerly anticipating the complimentary weekend. I inquired about the details of the weekend, but she didn't seem to have much information, so I asked about the client instead. Lucy explained that his name was William Fellows, estimating his age to be in his late 40s. She described him as good-looking, exuding confidence, and having inherited a family fortune. She seemed somewhat infatuated, describing him as powerful and composed, among other things. I couldn't help but think to myself, great, he sounds like an arrogant jerk, but I decided to keep that observation to myself until after the weekend. 2 weeks later, we found ourselves aboard a private charter plane on a Friday morning. I have to admit I was quite impressed. If the island belongs solely to him, he must be incredibly wealthy. I wasn't entirely sure what I had expected, but it appeared immense, perhaps about 5 miles long and a couple wide from what we could discern as we approached for landing. It resembled a luxurious 5-star resort, with the main structures nestled behind a pristine white sandy bay forming a flawless crescent shape. Lucy was overflowing with excitement, and the rest of us weren't far behind her. Upon arrival, we were escorted to our accommodations before gathering to meet our host for lunch on a veranda overlooking the bay. I had half expected to dislike him, but William came across as a reasonable individual. If anything, Lucy had underestimated his appeal. He exuded a certain George Clooney-esque charm. He expressed gratitude for our presence and encouraged us to make ourselves completely at home. We engaged in conversation with the other 3 couples from our firm and were introduced to a striking brunette named Charlotte, whom I assumed was William's companion for the weekend. Apart from the serving staff, there was only one other individual present who appeared to be security, lingering discreetly in the background without formal introduction. It made me wonder if William had adversaries that warranted security even on a seemingly deserted island. William greeted Lucy with the familiarity of an old friend, and they seemed entirely at ease in each other's company. She and the others appeared to defer to his opinions and suggestions, a natural response, I suppose, given his extraordinary generosity as a host and his status as our firm's most valuable client. We had an amazing afternoon, engaging in activities like snorkeling and paddle boarding in the bay, and just having fun. There was a continuous flow of complimentary drinks and food, and later we all gathered for a group dinner. The atmosphere was warm and relaxed, and we socialized in small clusters. Charlotte introduced herself to us. She was charming and shared stories of her upbringing in England. While she gave off an impression of coming from a well-off family, she seemed genuinely kind. I couldn't help but wonder if she worked as a model or perhaps didn't need to work at all. Surprisingly, she was quite flirtatious, even in the presence of Lucy, but I politely dismissed it as excessive friendliness. Being pampered without the presence of children, having time to unwind, and being in such a picturesque location set the stage for a romantic evening. Lucy was particularly affectionate, and our intimacy was passionate as she repeatedly professed her love for me. It was the most wonderful night we'd had in a while, making me reconsider the concept of a love island. I hoped for a repeat the next morning, but Lucy was quick to shower and eager to head to breakfast eventually. I got myself out of bed and joined them while they were talking to Jack and William. Both Jack and Lucy seemed a bit tense, and I wondered if it was work-related. Perhaps William was networking and had taken advantage of the weekend to discuss business matters with them. Our conversation dispersed upon my arrival, and after a quick meal, we continued to enjoy another fantastic day by the pool with our friends. We went out for dinner on Saturday, and I couldn't help but notice Lucy's attire. She was stunning in a red satin evening gown and elegant heels. Later, William requested a moment of our time. We followed him to the study, accompanied by a security guard. While William settled into a high-backed leather chair, I took a seat on the couch opposite Lucy, who seemed to keep a slight distance from me. After a prolonged silence, William broached the subject, saying, "Mark, I have a personal proposition for you." "Okay," I responded, managing to maintain composure despite my confusion. William explained, "I've had the pleasure of working alongside Lucy and getting to know her over the past few months. We've developed a great rapport and friendship." Though I was unsure where this was heading, the word relationship made me uneasy. He continued casually, "Therefore, I propose spending the rest of the weekend with Lucy. Naturally, I'm willing to compensate for the time she would have spent with you. I intend to transfer $100,000 to your joint account." I burst out laughing, convinced it was a joke. I couldn't resist teasing William. "It seems you're being a bit of a miser. Didn't Robert Redford offer $1 million for Demi Moore?" No one else found it amusing. William continued, "As with any arrangement, I'm open to negotiating the price to achieve my desired outcome. Additionally, Charlotte would appreciate some company, and I would be grateful if you could entertain her." I turned to Lucy, expecting her to be amused, but instead, she appeared concerned. "Mark, this isn't a joke. William has invited me to join him, and I think we should seriously consider his offer." I felt the urge to lash out at him, and when I glanced back, the security guard was now closer. I marveled at how he had managed to move without my noticing. William persisted, "I assure you your wife is fully supportive of the idea. There's no harm in it. We'll all have a great time, and you'll walk away with a significant sum of money." Glancing at Lucy, I remarked, "Perhaps the price difference is because Demi Moore was hesitant." Lucy winced at my comment but wisely chose not to respond. I struggled to think clearly, my breathing becoming increasingly difficult to control. I glanced at the security guard, noticing a stark shift in his demeanor. He appeared vigilant and focused on my actions, understandably so considering my strong urge to punch William in his insincere face. "What's your name?" "Former military, judging by your demeanor." "Has he pulled this kind of stunt often?" I inquired. "Shane, sir." "I'm unable to comment on the matter," he replied. "And if I were to confront your despicable boss, you could probably incapacitate me with your bare hands, right?" I speculated. Shane smiled, Perhaps just restrain you, sir. Addressing William, I remarked, it's fortunate you brought him along, or else I might have taken the opportunity to pummel you. William remained unfazed. Let's not rush things, Mark. There's a lot at stake for you. Lucy interjected, Mark, please consider it. It's only a matter of days, and the money could change our lives. Her words hit me hard. It was evident she had orchestrated this and was eager to proceed. Tell me, honey, did the offer of money come after you two decided on this plan? With no response, I continued, and I suppose Charlotte was thrown in to sweeten the deal as well. What is she, a hired companion? William responded, Charlotte is a close friend of mine. Besides being affluent, she operates as a high-end escort, selectively choosing contracts that intrigue her. You can be certain that an encounter with her would be extraordinary. I suppose that implies they're both engaging in prostitution. Lucy winced again but remained silent. Well, William, you can shove your money where the sun doesn't shine. Lucy revealed her true feelings, saying, this is my body, and I want it. It's just intimacy, and getting to know other people could be enjoyable for both of us. William and I have sympathy for each other, but that doesn't change our love. I'm sure you and Charlotte would have had a good time too. I was taken aback as her words sank in slowly. The difference, my dear wife, is that I don't desire anyone else, and it's far more significant than you suggest. This is a breach of trust. Conspiring behind my back, I can never trust you again. If you're willing to do it once, why not again? Lucy swiftly responded, you're blowing this out of proportion. I've been transparent with you, so it's not collusion or secrecy. I'm being completely honest. This is something I need to do, but I'll be back to focus on us afterward. If you truly love me, you'll allow me this one thing. Imagine the possibilities with the money, family vacations, everything. Don't you dare use our children as an excuse. We don't require the money, and don't assume I'll take you back. Your so-called honesty only matters if we agree on it together, and the only person you've agreed with is this arrogant jerk. The money is just a pretext. You've planned this because you want to. I suppose the money and Charlotte are your backup because you didn't think I'd approve. Well, you were right. Even with the money, I still don't agree. Lucy persisted, you're right, I do want this. I desire something new, something different, and I'm drawn to William. But it doesn't have to harm us. I didn't intend to betray you, and you think this is better. You've already made your decision, even dressing up for him. Don't resist this, darling. You wouldn't want to face the consequences. What do you mean by that? I asked. Well, you wouldn't come out of it well. If you fight or pursue a divorce, you'd lose everything, the house, the kids. Even your job could be jeopardized. And there's truly no need for any of that, so just accept it. It'll be much easier. I'll see you tomorrow, and remember, I love only you. I had to leave. Breathing was becoming increasingly difficult, and if I stayed any longer, I feared I would break down. Standing up, I felt unsteady and stumbled towards the door. Despite hearing Lucy calling my name, I continued walking. As I crossed the hallway, Charlotte approached me and gave me a comforting hug, reassuring me that everything would be all right. I turned sharply to her, saying, and what are you, some kind of consolation prize? She walked away, holding her head high. I kept moving, eventually reaching outside and halfway across the courtyard, but I felt unwell. I heard footsteps behind me and was disappointed to see it was Shane, not Lucy. Listen, Shane, you really need to leave me alone. I'd like to, mate, but I need to make sure you're not going to do anything reckless. Like what? Do you have any suggestions? Because I'm completely lost. Mark, you don't look well. Just sit down against the wall, pull your knees up, and focus on taking long, slow breaths. I felt somewhat feeble and lacked the energy to engage in an argument. Though it felt like an eternity, it was probably only a few minutes before I regained composure. That's when I noticed Shane seated beside me. Thanks, I suppose. Not entirely sure what that was all about. Could be anxiety or a panic attack. You looked pretty pale, but you're looking better now. So, Shane, speaking of bad ideas, is there any escape route from this mess? Shane responded matter-of-factly, there's no way off this island tonight. No boats. The plane and pilot are occupied elsewhere. You might try calling for help, but a marital dispute hardly qualifies as an emergency. Well, I'm glad you're convinced she's unfaithful. She doesn't seem to grasp it, and I was starting to doubt myself. What should I do now? I can't even confront him because of you. Sorry about that. I wish I could step aside, but I'd risk losing my job, Shane continued. Listen, think through your options and devise a plan. Whatever you need to do can wait until Monday. It's like in the military, formulate a plan, stay put, and don't give away your intentions. The problem is I have no clue what to do. They seem to have everything covered, and I'll just have to endure tomorrow and Monday while you watch over me. Shane suggested, after a lengthy pause, there's a supply boat arriving early Monday morning. You could hop on that to avoid the crowded plane home. Nobody, including myself, wants to risk any accusations of kidnapping or imprisonment. I might even join you. This contract is losing its luster. I dislike being on the wrong side, even if the pay is good. Okay, that's helpful. I just need to get through tomorrow. Here's an idea, why don't we explore the island on foot tomorrow morning to keep you away from all the nonsense? Also, consider Charlotte. She's a wonderful girl, and you don't seem to have much to lose now. For tonight, you can get some rest in one of the cabanas if you'd rather not go back. No, I suppose our room is empty. I'll go back there. She might change her mind, you never know. Of course, she didn't, but surprisingly, I managed to sleep, I think due to exhaustion. The next morning, I quickly changed into some athletic attire and hurried downstairs, hoping to avoid everyone and head out with Shane. No such luck. As I entered the dining room, it fell silent. I grabbed some fruit for a quick bite amid murmurs of reassurance, hearing comments like, "It's fine," and "It's nothing, she'll be back." Then the finance director, John Cousins, and his wife approached. "Listen, Mark, we've all been there. Just let it happen. It's not personal." He sees other wives but moved on and is very generous. As he spoke, I noticed a blush creeping up his wife's neck. Just then, Lucy and William entered the room. Lucy appeared radiant, positively glowing with self-satisfaction, that is, until she caught sight of me. Her smile faltered, and she quickly released William's hand, coming over to either kiss or hug me. I kept her at arm's length and surveyed the room. Oh, for heaven's sake, I thought. What a complete fool I've been. Everyone must have known what was going to happen long before this weekend even began. With that realization, I moved to leave, but Lucy intervened, saying, "Please stay, Mark. We can still enjoy the company of our friends and make the most of the day together." I glanced around and saw all eyes on me, some expectant, others clearly amused by the unfolding drama. "No," I replied firmly. "He paid for you, so he can keep you. But before I go, there's something I need to say to everyone here. Since it seems this weekend has been in the works for a while, it's only fair that you all hear me out." The group looked shocked, exchanging nervous glances. To Jack and Margaret, I began, "I wouldn't have even considered coming on this weekend if it weren't for you. I never imagined you'd be involved in something so sordid. You seem to condone his behavior like some twisted fan club of voyeurs. I hope betraying me gave you some sick satisfaction." I could see them squirming uncomfortably. Clearly, this wasn't part of their plan. And Bill, don't think you're off the hook. This is very personal. Your role in destroying my marriage is not something I'll soon forget. Using my kids as leverage is despicable. I won't let anyone threaten my children. Lucy interjected, you're blowing this out of proportion. It was just a fling, an adventure, and it doesn't have to affect us. I told you I love you. I interjected, here we hear the initial stage of protection. In fact, it does not mean anything. I know that you planned my reaction with the help of that idiot captain over there. So, let's see what you expected. I would venture to say that Stage A assumes that we will stay here while you try to adjust me to what happened and normalize the situation before we return home. Combined with the fact that you and your friends downplay this as insignificant, they have already started this story on your behalf. No doubt you think I shouldn't overreact, sulk, or act childish. I have to grow up, after all. It's just my ego and pride. Of course, you know that this will be ineffective, but it's all part of my mitigation process. Now we move on to Stage B. After the weekend, you let me bring you back. We make love often, perhaps experimenting with something new. It is assumed that we will only benefit from your novel and be better than ever. You better not let my sense of loss last too long, darling. Lucy glanced nervously at William. The remarks seemed to strike a chord with her. Moreover, we will have the money he offered for you. We can spend the proceeds from your illegal activities by taking the children to Disneyland and introducing them to Mickey. Quite a few of them visibly reacted with discomfort to that. If we're still at an impasse, Phase C comes into play. You planted that seed last night. If I truly cared for you, I'd allow you this. You've been an exceptional wife for 15 years, it's just one night, something for yourself. Yes, that might weaken my resolve, but what do I get after 15 years of devotion to you? Treated poorly, that's what. You knew I would never agree and manipulated me, displaying a complete lack of respect. So that plan won't suffice. You're feeling a bit anxious now. Perhaps it's best to give me some time to cool off, a week or two. Find me drowning my sorrows in a bar somewhere, and then beg for forgiveness. This is Phase D, you're genuinely sorry for everything, you had no idea it would hurt me so much, and you wouldn't have done it if you had realized. You love me, pleading, crying, the whole ordeal. I must admit you have a chance with that approach. But then, the way you walked in hand in front of everyone, looking so pleased with yourself, it solidifies in my mind that there isn't genuine guilt or remorse, just disdain and a desire to embarrass me. Phase D won't work out for you. So as a last resort, the fallback plan might be necessary. Phase E, threats. You'll take all the money in the house and turn the kids against me. You already hinted that I could lose my job. William will pay to get you the best lawyers. I'll end up sad, poor, and alone. You might even threaten to move in with him and live happily ever after with our kids. William's sudden movement caught my attention, almost prompting a laugh from me. Seems like Loverboy isn't too thrilled about the kids, babe, I remarked. Lucy finally found her voice, saying, this really isn't as big of a deal as you're making it out to be. Why don't we just take a breath and give ourselves some time to think? That's Phase A, Lucy. We've already been through that, I replied flatly. Then let's cut to the chase. That's what I was pondering last night, and my conclusion is that everyone, including the kids, would be better off if we went our separate ways. Living in an unhappy home isn't healthy, and let's be real, you can't expect happiness if you're pulling stunts like this. And I'm certainly not happy. You may try to keep me away from the kids, but you know I'm a good father and a positive influence on them. They're old enough to understand. I doubt your family and friends will side with you once they know what you've done. Money doesn't concern me, that's always been your thing. Silence filled the room as everyone sat in shock, staring like goldfish. Any of you bastards have any more advice? Did I miss anything? No? That's what I thought. Oh, and one more thing, Jack, you can shove your job where the sun doesn't shine, but I'll see you in court for that constructive dismissal case. It seems like a valid reason when my job depends on a client sleeping with my wife. With that, I stormed out. The room fell silent as usual. Shane followed me as we left. Shane chuckled, "Nice move back there. Looks like you took that advice about keeping your plans to yourself seriously." I couldn't help but smile. "Yeah, I guess I messed that up." Shane laughed as we stepped outside the building. "It's a good thing you didn't join the military, you wouldn't have lasted a day. Anyway, let's get going." Shane grabbed a backpack and started walking up the coast at a brisk pace. After a mile I was struggling to keep up and starting to question if this was a mistake. I heard Shane shout something from ahead about physical torture being a distraction from mental torture. My burning muscles and lungs seemed to agree. The scenery was stunning, and stories from his time in the British military kept us entertained along the way. We spent hours away, first circling to the north of the island and then scrambling along the coast before heading towards the high point in the middle. Just as I caught my breath, Shane suggested jogging back since it was all downhill. Struggling to keep up, I suspected he had slowed down either to support or tease me, depending on one's perspective. By noon we returned. I was exhausted, gasping that I had thought I was fit before today. Shane, hardly out of breath, kindly remarked I was pretty fit and not to feel too bad about it, mentioning his past as a PT instructor in the forces. Dragging myself to my room, Lucy was absent, and I wondered if my wife was earning more of her fee. After showering and finding myself ravenous, I headed to the dining room only to be disheartened once again by William and Lucy's presence. Shane too was there, appearing as fresh as a daisy and dressed in a suit. William, with his usual airy confidence, began to speak. "Mark, my dear fellow, I feel we've started off on the wrong foot and I wish to apologize. I've never encountered this issue with my lens before, and I certainly don't want to jeopardize your marriage." "Too late, you already have," I replied. "I want to retract my request to spend tonight with your wife and increase the compensation." With that, William handed me a piece of paper. Upon opening it, I found a check for $250,000. I gazed at Lucy, her tear-streaked face drawing my attention. Unable to resist, I remarked, "You must have done something remarkable to earn that much, babe." Lucy's eyes sparked with anger. "This isn't about that," she retorted. "We made a grave error and are attempting to rectify it. William has been nothing but respectful and genuinely concerned about your reaction." I chuckled at her assertion. "What's your definition of a gentleman then? Did he thank you after he was done?" "Let's not be sarcastic, Mark. This was a mistake on our part. A misjudgment of your response. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us both. You should appreciate Lucy's sacrifice for the sake of you and your children." "A mere misjudgment," I scoffed. "I made my disapproval of your plan abundantly clear, yet you proceeded anyway. You could have halted it at any time, but you only stopped after satisfying yourselves. Well, you've misjudged this maneuver as well." With that, I tore up the check. "I just saved you from having to engage in illegal activities, dear. As for cheating, I'm not sure I can fix it this time." Her tears began immediately. I turned to William, questioning, "What motivates you to behave this way? Is it about control or the excitement of pursuing another man's wife? Regardless, it only paints you as a pitiful individual. Honestly, at 48, you're still acting like a child who snatches toys simply because he can. Don't you have more meaningful pursuits to focus on?" William chuckled in response. "I manage an international corporation and contribute millions to charity. I have plenty to occupy my mind. From what I found in my research last night, you inherited that corporation, and it's been declining under your management. As for charity work, attending gala dinners and fundraisers can hardly be considered a challenge. When was the last time you actually got your hands dirty and genuinely helped someone? I doubt you have that capability. You're too absorbed in yourself and too busy manipulating others. Planning this weekend with everyone aware of the situation, it must be the humiliation that excites you. I'm sorry, Lucy, but this wasn't solely about your desire. He slept with the wives of everyone on the board, so you're just one among many. It was the first time I'd seen him speechless, appearing uncertain of himself. I continued, Shane, it would be wise for you to remove this worthless item from my sight before I decide to confront you directly. I noticed Shane suppressing a smirk as he said to William, I believe it's time for us to leave, sir, before your safety becomes a concern. After they departed, I grabbed a bite to eat and headed down to the beach, hoping to avoid the others. Just when I thought I had the beach to myself, I spotted Charlotte relaxing in a hammock with a book. If she was beautiful before, she was absolutely radiant as she smiled. Approaching her, I said, I apologize for last night. Before I could continue, she interrupted, there's no need to apologize. I was under the impression you would accept the offer presented. If I had known, I wouldn't have approached you. Your reaction was completely understandable, and your speech at breakfast was truly remarkable. I couldn't agree more. When you left, Lucy burst into tears, and William looked utterly embarrassed. I thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be saying that considering what you're dealing with, I responded. Thanks, that's all right. I'm somewhat glad that some understanding is beginning to take hold. I'm quite tired of being told it's insignificant. Do you realize William is clueless about how to handle you? He's never faced rejection before and isn't accustomed to dealing with morals. Has he offered you more money yet? Yes, just before I came down. $250,000. What a fool. I advised him against it, but he's used to throwing money until he gets what he wants. It's going to cost him in business as well as personally. Charlotte turned out to be an easy conversationalist, and she listened attentively as I discussed my marriage and children. She was clearly intelligent and well-educated. She expressed surprise that Lucy had done this while seemingly in a happy marriage, assuming there was some unhappiness or an agreement between us to open our marriage. I pondered, no, just a sudden ambush. She seems completely infatuated with the guy. He has that effect on women. It's all very charming, but there's not much substance beneath the surface, if you catch my drift. We continued our conversation, and I began to feel slightly better. It seems like you truly love her. Your reactions to the offers and at breakfast must be heartbreaking for you, she remarked. I shrugged in response. I apologize for any role I may have played in this. It's not your fault. I just need to get through another night, and then maybe I can escape, I replied. She smiled again, her smile becoming increasingly distracting. Well, perhaps I can assist with that. They were surprised to see me at dinner. Lucy was no longer seated beside William. Dinner proceeded relatively normally, although I ignored all of Lucy's attempts at small talk. When Lucy suggested an early night, I politely declined, stating that I had other plans. Her confusion only grew as Charlotte gracefully approached the table, linking arms with me as I stood. Together, we left the room and walked down to the beach cabanas. Initially, the plan was simply to leave together and give Lucy a taste of her own medicine. But as Charlotte held me in her arms, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. As we kissed, some of the frustrations of the past 24 hours began to fade away. I briefly considered holding on to the moral high ground, maintaining a sense of right and wrong. However, as I looked at Charlotte, I realized that Lucy had already broken our marriage vows. That night with Charlotte was exceptional. It wasn't just her physical beauty but also her serene, almost masterful presence. Every movement seemed perfectly timed. Surprisingly, I didn't dwell on thoughts of Lucy, nor did I feel guilty. The painful memory of Lucy with William was enough to eradicate any lingering remorse. I made good time taking the supply boat, catching a taxi to the airport, and then proceeding with a routine flight back home. After picking up the kids, I tried to catch up on their weekend as best as possible. I concocted a vague story about their mom and me having an argument but reassured them that we would work it out. Just as I suggested eating out, Lucy stumbled into the house, dragging our heavy suitcase. The kids dashed upstairs to get ready, shouting, "Hey, Mom!" Lucy smiled and said, "Eating out sounds like a good idea. Give me a few minutes to get ready." "I'd prefer if you didn't, Lucy. As you mentioned, I'm uncertain about how much time I'll have with them, so I'd rather we went alone." When I first encountered William, there was an immediate connection. He exuded an aura of confidence, strength, and charm reminiscent of the classic heroes of old cinema. It struck me as odd that in Mark's presence later, he displayed none of these traits. Our initial flirtation progressed to lunches, then dinners, which filled me with excitement and left me feeling dizzy. When he kissed me goodnight after dinner, I nearly melted, but I remained resolute not to betray my commitment and conveyed this to him. William mentioned his past experiences with open relationships, leading me to believe Mark might consider it. So when William proposed, I thought the financial aspect might sway Mark. Jack supported the idea, and we began planning for the weekend. The weekend began splendidly. I enjoyed Mark's company so much that I almost abandoned the entire plan. If only I had. William assured me that everything would work out and encouraged me to relax. Both he and Jack advised me to anticipate Mark's rejection but to give him time to cool down. When I first encountered William, there was an immediate connection. He exuded an aura of confidence, strength, and charm reminiscent of the classic heroes of old cinema. It struck me as odd that in Mark's presence later, he displayed none of these traits. Our initial flirtation progressed to lunches, then dinners, which filled me with excitement and left me feeling dizzy. When he kissed me goodnight after dinner, I nearly melted, but I remained resolute not to betray my commitment and conveyed this to him. William mentioned his past experiences with open relationships, leading me to believe Mark might consider it. So when William proposed, I thought the financial aspect might sway Mark. Jack supported the idea, and we began planning for the weekend. The weekend began splendidly. I enjoyed Mark's company so much that I almost abandoned the entire plan. If only William had assured me that everything would work out and encouraged me to relax. Both he and Jack advised me to anticipate Mark's rejection but to give him time to cool down. However, Mark's reaction deviated completely from our expectations and plans. The most surprising aspect was his obvious distress. I wanted to follow him, but William reassured me everything would be fine. He arranged to meet Charlotte, so when Mark didn't return, I assumed he was with her. Feeling relieved after months of waiting, I yearned to be with William desperately. His kiss reassured me that I could endure this ordeal. He led me to his bedroom where he treated me with such tenderness, as though I were the most delicate prize. I felt truly special. After that, we had a wonderful night. I woke up in the middle of the night in confusion, thinking I was sleeping with Mark, only to be shocked by the presence of another person lying next to me. I felt guilty, wondering where Mark was and how he was feeling. I must have disturbed William, who woke up and kissed me, but my guilt was soon forgotten when he reiterated what had happened between us. In the morning, as I was brushing my teeth, William approached me from behind, and once again, we found ourselves in bed. That was all I had hoped for, and I was in high spirits. I kissed William and thanked him for the wonderful night. It felt natural to hold his hand as we descended the stairs and made our way to the dining room. With another eagerly awaited night ahead of me, I turned to see Mark, and everything shattered. I had to suppress panic as Mark erupted. Everything was supposed to go differently. It was clear he hadn't slept with Charlotte. Even without that, I thought he would leave in anger, but I didn't expect such rage. His cold fury scared me the most. Mark was too logical about it all, anticipating almost all of my rehearsed arguments. They sounded much more convincing when I presented them with William's support, but Mark destroyed them all in 5 minutes, making them seem weak and pathetic even to me. I tried my best to stand my ground, but I knew I was failing. After he left, I collapsed in a fit of hysterical sobbing. For the first time, William seemed unsure. When I regained consciousness, I tried to find him but couldn't. That's when Jack and William came up with the idea to stop everything, offering more money later in the same day. When we offered Mark additional money, I was taken aback by the turn of events. William's presence seemed so insignificant, he truly appeared small, even inconsequential. Previously, his authoritative demeanor had me believing everything he said, but that authority was crumbling. He reassured me that we could have some fun without causing irreparable damage to my marriage. That plan fell apart, and I was left unsure of anything. Then I fell into irrational anger, assuming I was going to stay on the island longer and have fun, only to be met with Jack's calm yet stern response, "Don't be damn foolish, Lucy. If you want even the slightest chance to salvage your marriage, beg for forgiveness. It's better for you to be honest and truly mean everything you say." He didn't seem like a guy who was going to change his mind. Personally, I can't argue with anything he said. Over breakfast, I was even more shocked when Jack told William they would never return. He went on to say that Mark was a decent guy and didn't deserve any of the mess we were making, and William should heed his advice and think about growing up. I was shocked to see Mark at dinner. I tried to talk to him, but he just ignored me. When he left with Charlotte, I felt devastated. I wanted to run after him, but what could I say? I actually told him to do it, and for most of the trip, I justified the senseless intimacy. I felt anger and betrayal, and then I remembered that I had done this and more to Mark. Even worse, all my behavior was deliberate and so public. I think I deserve it. At least it could help us stay together if we both changed. The plane journey back without Mark made me realize what a mess my marriage was. He really managed to find a way off the island before us. I still hadn't properly spoken to him since the incident. The realization of my actions began to sink in, and waves of guilt overwhelmed me. I reminded myself of the money. I mean, who in their right mind would turn down such a sum? My constant tears escalated into full-blown sobs that I couldn't control and bordered on hysteria. Jack and Margaret grew increasingly concerned about my well-being. When I got home, Mark was there but didn't want me to have dinner with him and the kids. I struggled to hold myself together until they left, and then another bout of tears burst forth. Being excluded from dinner felt like an ominous prelude to my future life. Eventually, after collecting myself, I desperately tried to think of what to say when Mark returned. The problem was that everything sounded like what he had already described, and I was too embarrassed to ask my mom or friends for advice. Upon our return home, the children predictably retreated straight to their bedrooms, engrossed in video games and phones. I found myself gazing at Lucy in the kitchen, feeling as though she was a total stranger. Almost in a whisper, she said, "Can we have a proper talk?" I shrugged, realizing that we needed to address things sooner or later, so why prolong it? "I'm sorry, Mark. I assured you it was a one-time occurrence, and I'll remain as devoted to you as I was before the weekend. I did it for the money, it could be life-changing for our family. I did it for us. You did it for yourself. We were fine, and money wasn't a problem. You couldn't wait to jump into his bed. It must have been thrilling, whining, dining, and the rest. Overall, everyone had a good time. You're overreacting. It doesn't have to mean anything. You should skip phase A, Lucy, it's nonsense, and you know it. It wasn't a one-off mistake, it was a deliberate betrayal, frail, arrogant, selfish, all the qualities I detest, and now I detest you. Well, you did the same thing with that woman. No, I didn't. I sought revenge because nothing seemed to get through to you. You were too absorbed in yourself to see how it affected me. I wouldn't have even considered it if I had a faithful wife. I hope it hurt, really hurt, so you might understand my pain. But I didn't plan it beforehand or let everyone else in on it, making a fool of me. Speaking of which, how long did it take for your clandestine plan to unfold? Was that your first time with him? Her eyes widened at the question, then she realized it was fair and reasonable. It was the initial occasion. We shared lunches, and I could sense his fondness for me. I believe Jack and Margaret were gauging my interest. The four of us had dinner, and for the first time in my marriage, I felt drawn to another man. His confidence was captivating, though I knew it was morally wrong and struggled against it, ultimately avoiding an affair. Then William proposed the idea of discussing an open relationship with you, maybe even considering swapping partners. We briefly broached the topic one evening, but it was evident you wouldn't agree. Then he suggested the proposal, thinking money would justify it to you. As the trip neared, we grew anxious and decided to invite Charlotte to reassure your acceptance. I wasn't keen on the idea, but by then, I just wanted it to happen. I thought, even if you didn't fully approve, we could recover. However, you effectively shattered those notions during breakfast, and I began to grasp the gravity of my actions. Was it worth it? Lucy paused. No, absolutely not. I got so caught up in him and what he offered. I never intended to hurt you. Straight to face the unintentional hurt. But you did enjoy it, didn't you? Your demeanor at breakfast made that abundantly clear. Now you're just saying what you think I want to hear. I'm sorry, but the truth is, yes, I enjoyed it. It was satisfying, not better, just different. It was exhilarating, something new, and I was infatuated with him. He was experienced and knew what he was doing, but it was a one-time occurrence. Please don't throw away our family for a fleeting moment. I found myself letting out a wry chuckle. Funny, because that's exactly how I would characterize what you've already done, shattered our family for a fleeting moment. This is entirely your responsibility, not mine. You're right. This is all my fault. I'm deeply sorry. I love you more than anything. Not entirely, though, is it? You gave a piece of your heart to him, or even if you deny it, your love wasn't sufficient to remain faithful to me. How can I trust you again? I was so trusting because I never imagined you capable of such betrayal. Maybe I never truly knew you. I can barely stand to look at you, let alone pretend it never occurred. Lucy recoiled in disbelief. You can't mean that. You love me, I know you do. I never thought I could lose you. No, you only thought of yourself and your desires, not me or the children. Sometimes love isn't enough. I endeavored to soothe my emotions and move past the tension and anger. After a prolonged pause, I resumed speaking. Listen, Lucy. Even if we were to remain together and attempt to move past this as you're suggesting, things would never be the same. You shattered the trust and the caring bond we shared. Remember when our priority was looking out for each other and the kids above all else? We vowed to protect each other from harm. I never imagined you would be the one causing the pain. Mark, I love you. I made a grave error and would do anything to undo it. We can't let this lead to a divorce. You broke my heart and resorted to manipulation to get what you wanted. That's not something you do to someone you genuinely love. Lucy simply stared, at a loss for words. We need to discuss the children. I believe children fare better in separated families than dysfunctional ones, so divorce seems like the best option from that perspective. I understand you would likely win custody, but don't try to prevent me from seeing them. It's in your best interest too, they respect me. You struggle with setting boundaries. I couldn't help but grimace at the irony of that statement, and they're already pushing the limits with you. It would benefit you and them to keep me involved in their lives, Lucy shrugged. Lucy, seriously, whatever happens, don't keep me from our kids. Don't alienate me. I'm not the villain here. I'm good for them, and I adore them. You haven't seen me truly upset yet. I'll fight you tooth and nail, drain our finances on lawyers, and we'll both suffer in the process, she nodded. I would never do that. You're an excellent father, and they need you. They'll want you to continue taking them on outings and supporting them in their sports clubs. I turned to her, taken aback by her initial comment where I sensed a lack of manipulation or excuse. Be careful, Lucy, I warned. You're jeopardizing Faye's. Seriously though, you know me well enough, so I couldn't help but think deep down she wanted us to split. God, never, Lucy urgently replied. There's no excuse. I got selfish, convinced myself I could have something more. I thought somehow I could still keep you. Why didn't you stop me that night? Why did you just leave? I couldn't believe it and had to leave. And afterward, it didn't seem to matter much. The fact that you desired someone else by any means necessary meant I had already lost you. That conversation had doomed us long before you ended up in his bed. Maybe it was over when you started planning it. You spent weeks talking to him and arranging it. Letting you go without forcing you to stop made ending things easier. There's no turning back. And so began the end, a marriage shattered in less than 4 days. Thankfully, we divorced without the need for counseling. I suppose Lucy didn't want to justify her actions. It's a pity, in a way. I had hoped a professional could shed light on her delusions. She did keep one promise, though. We ended up sharing custody of the kids fairly evenly. She even confessed to them that it was all her fault, without delving into the details. They were old enough to grasp it and often decided for themselves where they wanted to stay. They were at that age where parents become glorified chauffeurs and money providers. I might be biased, but I believe they're exceptional kids who handled the breakup remarkably well. Children can demonstrate remarkable resilience. The divorce settlement allowed Lucy to maintain ownership of our house until the kids reached adulthood, giving her the option to sell it or buy me out. However, I was already leaning towards this arrangement for the sake of our children, ensuring their stability at the same school. Thankfully, choosing what felt right morally paid off. By the time our children were off to college, property values had soared, compelling Lucy to buy me out. It turned out to be a highly profitable decision. As for how she managed to afford it, we had set aside $250,000 and divided it during the divorce. Similar to my approach during my time with Charlotte, I couldn't hold on to the moral high ground indefinitely. I must admit I'm a practical person. Moreover, it seemed a small price compared to the costs of marriage and the once happy life we shared. Subsequently, I resigned from my job, received compensation to avoid a potentially embarrassing employment tribunal, and launched my own web design business. Despite Lucy's persistent attempts to reconcile, I remained uninterested. Was ending things the right decision? It was messy, with no clear winners, but the initial threats and consequences never materialized. That night remains unforgettable, and there's something deeply meaningful about being able to look oneself in the mirror and genuinely appreciate the reflection. Thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed them, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on these events in the comments below. Take care.